woke racism and how a new religion is betraying Black America. So, okay, so that's quite the title. I mean, I'm sure it was very carefully chosen. And Wikipedia informed me that you're formally atheistic, and so which may or may not be relevant to our discussion. But it's very interesting to me that you picked that as part of the title. Why? Why do you believe that? Why this emphasis on a new religion? And what does that mean exactly?
Well, we're at a point where the kinds of beliefs that I'm talking about Black people, are no longer held as an opinion. It's at the point
Interesting.
where a certain kind of person lives these beliefs in a way that is so impervious to any kind of reasonable discussion that you start to notice that it really is a matter of religion, in the sense particularly of Abrahamic religions, rather than opinion. And there are all sorts
Okay,
of
so
things.
what's the difference between religious belief and mere opinion in your estimation?
It is that many religions require that at a certain point you suspend disbelief and stop relying on conventional ratiocination and logic. There's a point at which you're supposed to have faith and believe in miracles of some sort. And it's at the point where, when it comes to race, there are things that one is supposed to insist on and believe, regardless of whether they correspond to reality or even any sense of justice. One in Christianity is supposed to be dedicated to showing that you have faith in Jesus. Within the religion that I'm talking about, the cardinal point is that you show that you know that racism exists, just that you know that it exists. Now, what you're going to do about it is irrelevant. Whether or not what you're showing actually is racism is irrelevant. The fact is that you knew you were supposed to be looking for it. And only that imperative, as ding-dong as it sounds, explains a lot of the things that we've seen, especially lately. There was a real jump in the rails after summer 2020, but even before that. And it means that a lot of people look at what goes on with the race scene in the United States. And I know to an extent, there is that in Canada too. Whenever you see these sorts of things happening and you see brilliant people making arguments that don't make any sense and utterly despising those who disagree with them as if they were heretics, word chosen deliberately, it's because what we're seeing, even though these are people who are usually very secular in their self-conception.
Let me just wrap it up here, and try to make sure that we are on the same page. So clearly religion has their fair share in society. That's been important. We've seen it in multiple societies, even in Asia, in Latin America, even before the Europeans came to bring their own influence to the current or former people that were living in those lands. Clearly, there was a sense of religion or spirituality going on in these societies. Now, clearly, we we tried, or we are continuing trying, to take Christianity out of the Western world because somehow we think that we might have a better solution to that, which is Christianity or religion. Now, knowing that these societies have already established some kind of religious ceremonies or religious practices, wouldn't that make you, or wouldn't that make society replace that emptiness with a new religion? And I think that's what he's trying to convey here. Let's see where he goes with this.
It's a religion. This is exactly the kind of person who sent Galileo into exile a very, very long time ago. And the people back then often didn't think of themselves as religious. It was just considered truth. We're faced with that same kind of thought, even if the word isn't applied. And it makes, the reason I'm putting it that way is not just to annoy people by calling them religious, although I think it will annoy them. And it'll also annoy actual religious experts who will say that I'm stepping outside of my lane, which I most definitely am. But all of this stuff only makes sense if you realize that these people are religious and that they have to be treated as parishioners and not
religious, being in a sense, because absence of Christianity is let me just substitute it with, there's racism, therefore, because racism, we need to do everything possible to make sure racism doesn't exist, even if there's no evidence of great scale of evidence. If, let's say, there's none, almost none, you still have to believe it in order to be part of this religion, and therefore we're gonna shame you. I guess that's where he's going with this. Let me know if I'm a little bit
Not as
off
people
here.
who are up for an argument.
I've had a number of people make the same case to me recently, very profound people in my estimation. So I want to run a few ideas by you and see what you think. So I've thought a long time about the religious endeavor, let's say, from the psychological perspective, trying to unpack it. And it's related in some sense to the idea of depth. And so if you think about stories, literary stories, let's say, great works of literature for that matter, and lesser works, we all have this intuition that some stories are shallow, and they might be entertaining, but they're shallow, and some stories are deep. And we have the same sense in music, for that matter. But so we have this natural sense of depth, and part of what that is related to is something like place in the axiomatic structure of propositional thinking. So something is deep if a lot of other things you think depend on it, and it's shallow if you can dispense with that and it doesn't do much to your underlying cognitive architecture. So that seem reasonable so far?
Very much, yes.
Okay. And then I would say that there's a set of experiences that are universally human, more or less, that occur when our deeper beliefs are challenged. And that threatens the way that we construe the world and our ability to act in it. It threatens us with nihilism. It threatens us with chaos. It's no trivial matter. That happens often when heretofore separated cultures come into contact with one another.
Definitely.
So worlds can move when that occurs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, and then I would say that the set of emotions that are associated with the movement of deep beliefs are what we describe when we describe religious experience. Mm-hmm. And this is part of the reason I've had a number of conversations with famous atheists and very smart people. I mean,
Interesting.
Harris, for example, is an extraordinarily smart person. And I'm familiar with Richard Dawkins' work and Daniel Dennett's work. These people are far from foolish, but they miss the point to me to some degree. Speaking, even scientifically speaking, because they treat religion.
Missing the point. Missing the point. I guess that I'm not a professional in the conversation between atheists and Christianity, but I do understand that you will see a lot of atheists in a Christian nation, right? We haven't seen an atheist nation where you have a lot of Christians, right? So we haven't. I will start from there and see how can we determine morality. Because morality has to come from something divine, right? And I'm not saying a human or a thing divine, just a structure of divine guidance, I might say. Even though now we know that Jordan is a Christian person, I would like to see because I'm trying to understand, can the spiritual side of the question of the human can be substituted. Now, if it can be substituted, let's say there's no God, but could it be substituted by something that can perceive you as part of something? In this case, wokeism. It'll be one based on what I'm hearing. Let me know if I'm in the right line or I'm in the wrong. I want to see.
Religion as if it's a set of abstract propositions about the material structure of the world. And that's usually how the argument with religious people is framed. And they're often foolish enough to accept that initial framing. But there's a lot of phenomena that fall into the religious domain that have nothing to do with propositional truth. I mean, we already had a conversation about music, and music has often been used across many cultures for sacred purposes.
Yeah,
And
correct.
part of the reason for that is the emotional state that it's capable of invoking, which is something like awe at the deepest level. And also its ability to unite people in harmony, let's say, and in dance and all of that. And so
That's a good point.
there's no escaping the reality of the religious instinct. And here's the point I'm trying to make with all that to some degree. So imagine this, think about this for a second. So there's this statement in the New Testament that we should render unto God what is God's and unto Caesar what is Caesar's. And you couldn't find, you'd be hard pressed to find a single statement ever uttered by anyone that had a more remarkable effect on the development of political systems. Because in some
Oh, that's a good point too. Clearly, some political systems are derived, right, for something that is greater. That's the thing. I know the United States is founded by Christianity, and a lot of you guys has helped me understand a lot of the fundamentals of the Western world, especially here in the United States. Now, can we say the same thing with other cultures? Sure. Buddhism with Asia, right? Islamic with the Middle Eastern. Africa was more. I'm not well rounded there. Let me just back off a little bit. In Latin America, we're more spiritual rituals. I think Africa and in Central America will be the same thing. And when I'm talking about Africa and Central America and South America, I'm not saying post-colonialism. I'm saying like, before colonialism, right? Because even though some places in Central and South America had some civilization, meaning there were some structures of power, and especially with the Aztecs, we understand that. But I'm talking, of course, before colonialism and not after. Let's see what.
trivial manner.
It's very interesting.
The idea that state and church should be separated is justified by that statement. So it's a deadly statement, but I also think it might be true psychologically. And that if we don't have an explicit territory marked out psychologically and socially for the sacred, and so that would be for the deepest things, then what happens is that things that should not be so deep start to take on exactly that aspect. Okay. Now, I'll finish this with one observation. I've been talking with someone I really admire. His name is Jonathan Pajot, and he's one of the deepest thinkers I've ever encountered in the religious domain. And he's well-versed in postmodernist.
Can you spell his last name?
Pageau.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, French-Canadian Catholic, turned atheist, turned Russian Orthodox icon carver. That's part of his background. Anyways.
There was another pickup artist. I think it was Ross, V. Ross. He was pickup artist for years, and all of a sudden, one change, he became an Christian Orthodox right away. Start tackling, the feminism thing, stuff like that, and all of a sudden he just changed. Boom, B. Ross. Very interesting, and I imagine that he was a little bit atheist, but no, we all have the experience. We all have the experience between being a kid and being a man, I guess. And the same for a female, being a little girl to a woman. And things start now, things were like this, and then the lines start straightening up a little bit, where things start making more sense now.
He made a very interesting comment in a talk I was watching on the weekend about false gods, let's say. And he talked about the danger of the idea of inclusivity when it's elevated to the highest place or put in the deepest place, let's say. And so if the purpose of all organizations becomes radical inclusivity, so that's the uniting factor, then the specific purpose of all those organizations is instantly threatened. Mm-hmm. And so part of the problem here is that what should be lower in the hierarchy of values is put in the higher place inappropriately, and that produces all sorts of social catastrophe.
Oh, man, this was good. That was very good. Man, they cut off in the part that I want to listen. Um, my question will be, is it's true? Okay, let's just go with Christianity. Christianity is the closest I know. If Christians negotiate the purpose of their Ten Commandment, to just be inclusive and to start accepting other things, would that erase the meaning of Christianity? That's my first question. My second question will be, if that happens to be the case, would that create the opposite of the religion itself? Okay? And if those two already happening, is there example of those already running and full momentum? If we already have the results, we can identify those results. Let's study those results. Because clearly we need some kind of, we can clearly, as humans, it's important for us to have our spiritual side under control, because it gives us a new fuel to move through life. And it's interesting that the title of the video that I'm watching is how woke ideology is becoming one America's new religion. It makes sense because boomers and millennials, right? There's a gap of culture. Something happens with the boomer and Generation X. They couldn't just transfer enough culture to millennials and Gen X, no, Gen Z, where Christianity is dissipating. And that's because we failed to just transfer culture. And talking about institutions, back then, Christianity was the main sort of spirituality in schools in the United States. Now it's being taken away, and now wokeism is coming to the table to substitute that which is or was Christianity in that time. The question will be if this good for the Western world, in this case, United States. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below, and I'm gonna really appreciate it.